We have an unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Oswald, and you're listening.
This is Moulton Howe, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
And those same people that would have had knowledge about the crash at Cape Girardeau, the retrieval of those bodies, the retrieval of a disk that had a neutronic propulsion device that would be applied to the development of the bomb as we got into the war, that would be dropped first as a test at White Sands at the Trinity site at the middle of July 1945, and 2 weeks later dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, officially ending World War II because of the staggering power of those atomic bombs. Underneath all of that, think about it, 42, 43, 44, 45. In those 4 years, if everything that Paul Blake Smith has dug up in this new book is true, that the relationship between FDR, between the war chief, George Marshall, between FDR, Cordell Hull, the 33rd degree Masons, was that they would have said, we must keep the knowledge of creatures from outer space and celestial plan forms. That was one of the phrases you find in those old documents. Celestial meaning from beyond the earth and the heavens, and plan form meaning with swoopy, a swoopy looking, smooth disc-like thing, or triangular shape like thing. Those men knew that they were dealing with something that would shock the world. And they went through World War II with that secret. And this also comes to another very important document that was released to the National Archives in England about 6 years ago. And this was at the time, approximately, when Larry King was periodically having people come on the Larry King Show to talk about these periodic releases from the Ministry of Defense in London to the National Archives having to do with UFOs. And England was making a big show that they were, quote-unquote, releasing all of their MOD UFO files to the public through the National Archive, and basically saying you don't need to file Freedom of Information Acts with us anymore. We've delivered everything to the National Archive, except approximately 6 years ago was that big headline, all 8,500 pages have gone missing in the UFO files from the Ministry of Defense, and that among those files, or a lot of them, were related to the RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge. So that meant that the MOD was sort of window dressing this release. But about that time, one of the documents that did come out, in spite of the headline that so many of the documents had gone missing, there was a letter from a man who currently works in England as a scientist now. He's alive. He works in a sensitive lab. Think I know where it is. And he handed over a description from his father, who was a personal security guard to UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill. And that the description in the letter is from his father, saying that it was around 1943 or 44. We're still in the throes of World War II. And Prime Minister Churchill is meeting with our General Dwight D. Eisenhower from the United States. And that the security guard can overhear them quite easily talking. And the discussion is a report that they had just gotten handed to them about a silver disc that was running rings around a Royal Air Force fighter, moving so fast there would be no human body ever that could take the G's of something spinning around the Royal Air Force jet that was moving fast in the air. And they started talking about that this is something from celestial space. And the quote is that Winston Churchill said to General Eisenhower, "We must keep this a secret for at least 50 years, or the stock markets will crash, religions will crumble, social society will deteriorate. This is a threat to the security of the world." And we also know that privately, Winston Churchill, in the same years, was sending a personal memo to somebody in the MOD saying, "What are these UFOs?" So that sets the big stage that the policy of denial, Dr. J, was being set, the implication is, by Winston Churchill and General Eisenhower during World War II, and that Dwight Eisenhower may have known from FDR about the Cape Girardeau bodies and craft. I was just going to conclude, that is how intertwined the history of our government before World War II, the coming into World War II, the months leading up to coming into World War II, and everything that happened during World War II that William Mills Tompkins says was an extraterrestrial war fought through humans, and then coming out of the war. And by 1947, only 2 years later, these various crashes in Roswell, the plains of San Augustine, Aztec, there were a bunch of crashes in the state of New Mexico, not entirely clear why, but by then they would have had from 1941 on to prepare and know, so that by the time all that stuff started happening in Roswell, it wasn't the beginning of anything. They already knew what they were dealing with, and the mistake, apparently, was when the base commander of the Roswell Army Airfield told Walter Haut to release that press release through the teletype, and that's what went out to newspapers. They weren't in on the policy of denial, and that's when General Ramey, operating under the orders from Washington, concocted that press conference down in San Antonio, brought in the pieces of weather balloon, because they were under orders that they were going to completely make everybody in the world discount the Roswell Daily Record flying saucer crashes at Ranch. They were going to explain that as a weather balloon come hell or high water, because they were under orders that this was of the highest national security to keep the public and the media from knowing anything about what today is called the alien presence.
Which proves that this was known a long time ago, a long time before any of the Hollywood movies. Proves again the Cape Girardeau incident. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think Charlotte Mann is a great person, and there's always been speculation that the photograph that was presented to the pastor was actually later switched out and or stolen. There's several comments here I want to say. First of all,
I'll guide your audience. This was, my byline date was May 27th, 2016, San Diego, California. This is my Earth Files reports, to in-depth with images and the MP3 audio so you can hear him yourself. This is with William Mills Tompkins, the retired aerospace engineer who worked on all of these models, worked in government agencies, and one of his quotes to me in World War II, this is the title of my Earth Files, that you guys go to www.earthfiles.com, just simply scroll down to the May 27th date. Everything is chronological, starting with the current date of June 21, and you just go down the page to May 27th, and you will find the title World War II was an ET battle fought through humans, according to retired U.S. Navy engineer, and this is William Mills Tompkins, who has this new book out. He is who he says he is. Robert Wood and I have seen documents, newspapers, all kinds of things. One of his quotes, Intel operatives, this is from him, William Tompkins. Intel operatives said that Adolf Hitler and the SS made agreements with reptilian extraterrestrials to give the SS secret information of extraterrestrial vehicles, their propulsion, their controls, their operation, and everything needed to build those UFOs and put them into production, close quote, and the location of all of that production, 2 places. First, Peenemünde, or Peenemünde in German. That's in the far northeastern peninsula of Germany, where in the 1920s there was communication between England and the United States. We didn't have a CIA then. We didn't have an OSS then. We just had some kind of operations in Washington that MI5 and MI6 in much older England could get in touch with, and that there was a document in which England was asking the United States, do you have any information about what the silver discs are that are rising up and coming down at Peenemünde in Germany? That was in the 1920s. Hitler was not hitting his stride until the middle 30s, but the bottom line here is, from William Mills Smith to Hitler, to what was going on in Peenemünde in the 1920s, was there was an alien presence already underground in some large cavernous place there, and William Mills says that in huge caverns in Antarctica, natural caverns, big, that the size of them is staggering, and that they go back millions of years, where a reptilian presence has been on this planet, and that it doesn't matter whether there are 2 miles of ice or not. And this is the picture to gain in your mind. If you racked the world clock back 15 million years, that is the consensus of current geophysicists, is the last time that the Antarctica continent was without all this ice. Well, if you go back then 15 million years, and according to William Mills Tompkins, even then, what the alien presence did was live in huge, vast caverns that they apparently adapted for their lifestyle, whatever, and their production of technologies that they needed. I know this sounds like a science fiction book, but I'm beginning to think this is all true. This is coming from somebody who was exposed to tremendous amounts of information as a young man, and as the war evolved, and the work that he continued to do and is still doing at age 93. And so we have to give him some respect, because it fits into other scenarios related to World War II and Hitler and reptilians and Nordics that I'm coming to here in a second. But just imagine that we have 2 miles of ice on what once was a ice-free continent that had tropical dinosaurs and tropical trees, or something like that. I mean, that's what's supposed to have been there long, long, long ago. Not that there were dinosaurs there 50 million years ago. They disappeared 65 million years ago, but the idea is that the Antarctic continent has been free of ice at periods on the planet. Something has taken advantage of natural large caverns under that land, so that even with huge global climate changes that have gone in and out of ice ages, putting ice now 2 miles thick still on Antarctica, it didn't matter to the alien presence, which Tompkins says is reptilian, underneath the ground in caverns at Antarctica and other parts of the world. In fact, he says that he learned that there are huge natural caverns all over this Earth. It has something to do with the geophysics of this planet, and that the alien presence has taken advantage of these caverns. This helps people to understand we're not talking about hollow Earth at the center of the Earth. Impossible. That's where the molten cores of iron, crystallized iron, and some nickel are. The center of the Earth is a big sphere. It's surrounded by liquid iron. There's nothing living at the center of our Earth. But when it comes to this concept of huge caverns that could be under the surface of the land in Antarctica, in various places in the United States, Europe, all around the world, you suddenly begin to realize that the 30 or whatever the miles are from the surface going down could look like Swiss cheese in some areas, and that might be what the status is today. That's what William Mills Tompkins says, that nothing has changed, that we still have an alien presence on this Earth right now. And that gives a whole new definition to the issue of what really happened in World War II. And this comes to perhaps the most difficult, the most complex issue of any of the material that I've studied and reported about in my 4 books and my documentaries, and I've done almost 5,000 radio shows over the last 36 years. And every once in a while I would touch on this, but never really talked about it until recently, even though there's a huge section in my 3rd book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, about what abductees call the resurrection technology, where rapid cycle cloning from DNA can create whole adult bodies of anything that is desired. This is where we get to the complexity of, if reptilians, standing up lizards and alligators, as people in the abduction cases have drawn and illustrated, they look like standing up alligators or standing up lizards. They would never, ever be confused for any kind of a human type of humanoid. But William Mills Tompkins, the people in my book, going back to 1998, and others, have described a relationship between reptilians and tall, blonde, blue-eyed Nordics. That alliance would explain perhaps why Adolf Hitler announced, when he was taking over the German government and it was becoming the Nazi party with the SS, that he was going to exterminate, that means eradicate, all of the Hebrews on Earth, and that the ruling population after he won the war would be tall, blonde, blue-eyed Aryans. Are they one and the same as the type of blondes that have been described as allied with these reptilians? Okay, put that over for a moment. And then come to what I have been told by the abductees, and it's in my 1998 book, that's almost 20 years ago, and a huge section about this rapid cycle cloning tube technology, where the abductees say that the beings who control this resurrection technology, this tube technology, rapid cycle cloning, they can make any body that they want, human, animal, or plant, doesn't matter. And they, the ones that are the makers of these rapid cycle cloning bodies, 100% control those bodies. Therefore, if you look at World War II as a chess game, you have to have multiple layers in that chess game, and it means that you could have reptilians that make blondes that are their surrogates, and the surrogates can move around on the earth anywhere they want to, and all the human population would think is they're tall, blonde, blue-eyed beings, when they could be under control of these reptilians. And then to make it even more difficult, the story is that there is another group of blondes that can have blue eyes or gold eyes, and that they are allies to the human Homo sapiens sapien. And those blondes can make any body container they want. They can make reptilians, they can make grays, they can make blondes, they can make tall blonde, short, they can make anything. All of a sudden, what you realize is that the concentration of humanity on skin color, race, blood types, all of that, it may actually be ingrained in the DNA that you better know who's in which body, because one could be dangerous and one could be an ally. And that we're on a planet that is concocted. We're on a planet where there are geopolitical territorial conflicts today between different non-human groups, and they can masquerade in human bodies. And for people who think this sounds like science fiction, I just recommend go and read and listen to the MP3s at my news website, earthfiles.com, from William Mills Tompkins, speaking from his own first-hand experiences working for the Department of the Navy in World War II and then in other companies later, in which, for the first time, as he said, he only has gone public since December of 2015. So that's 7 months ago. This is a new revelation from somebody, as he said to me, look, I'm going to be 93 years old on May 30th. What have I got to lose? And he said he checked in before he wrote the book, which he worked on with the aerospace engineer, Dr. Bob Wood, and that he checked in with one of the Navy admirals that had been one of his friends during all of these past many decades, said, I'm interested in writing a book about my extraordinary life. What can I say and what can't I say? And that the admiral looked at him and said, put it all in. Don't leave anything out. Everything you've been exposed to and you've learned and you've done is vital for the people of the United States to understand. And those are his words, not mine. That's what he says. You find that quote in his own words at earthfiles.com. Let's go back to geopolitical territorial conflict on this earth, in which human wars, quote unquote, are actually extraterrestrial wars. That is William Mills Tompkins' characterization of World War II, an extraterrestrial war fought through human bodies. Therefore, that would mean that Germany, the one that provoked World War II, was under control of and in collaboration with reptilians and some form of tall blondes with blue eyes. Then it means that the UK, Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand, the Allies, they would have to be one of these other groups working against the reptilians and the one particular type of tall Aryan blondes. And in the group with the Allies, apparently there are also blondes, red hairs, ebens. Ebens are the pear-shaped headed grays. There are as many types of grays as you would think of vacuum cleaners or anything else. There are just so many, and apparently the reason is There can be a prime intelligence that has a head that is shaped like a pear and does not have large black eyes, has actually vertical pupils underneath some kind of a covering in the eyes. So maybe they have a reptilian lineage, but they are considered to be different from the standing-up alligator types. And that those ebens with the pear-shaped heads, not the pointed chins. A lot of different people working in different agencies have always suggested that the ebens seem to try to help us in the United States. I raise this question. If humans, if Homo sapiens sapien and Neanderthalensis and the Denisovans going back to Homo erectus in the last 2 million years, if all of the models of standing up primates have been the result of genetic manipulation of already evolving primates on Earth by extraterrestrials, no matter which group the extraterrestrials are from, there's been mixing and matching and tweaking of genes on this Earth for at least 2 million years in the primate. How would any of the standing up primates ever be able to trust the non-humans that made them? And I guess what I'm raising is ultimately an existential question. If all of humanity is essentially a form of android that has been made we're biological, but we have been made to serve some purpose by non-humans, 1, 2, 3, 4, who knows how many. Anunnaki has been involved extremely deeply in this creation of the human slaves in the beginning, and now what are we today to any of them? You come to this existential question that what today in 2016 are hybridized, because hybrid means your genes have been mixed and matched 2, 3, God only knows how many times. That's what a hybrid is. So humanity today, all of us must be hybrids of some sort. The question is, with which percentage of which DNA manipulation in the 5 quote-unquote basic races, and then all of the sub-hybrids, and on it goes. And if the Anunnaki were a bullying, controlling alien presence on this planet that mixed and matched genes to create gold slave laborers in the beginning, and then the primates kept evolving, and the Anunnaki were mean and capricious. They were not nice at all. Would the penchant for the current Homo sapiens sapien humanity and all of its violence and wars be directly linked to the extraterrestrial genetic manipulators, their penchant for geopolitical territorial conflicts in their own galaxy, solar system domination, and that we are maybe a surprise in that we war, and right now we're in a terrible situation on the planet with what's going on in the Middle East that has been, let's say, festering there for millennia, perhaps directly related to all of this manipulation by non-humans and alien presence. And when you start to look at world affairs through that lens, and you start to back up far enough to say, humans have been manipulated through religions and geopolitical territorial fights forever. But maybe if we could learn the truth about our true nature, our true origins, then we might begin to be liberated from control. And we might find that there was more a likeness in the human condition then is justified by these attacks in the name of different gods. When you realize that human history to date, that more people have been killed fighting about whose God is superior to another's, it just seems irrational. And that if we all could be freed about what we really are, how concocted this planet is, that the territorial conflicts are serving somebody else, not humans, maybe we would stop all wars.
Which is what needs to happen to end the primitive culture. With that being said, we have to go to break. There's a great question, which is going to have to wait till after. I'm just going to leave you guys with one quick comment. This comes from Marie 6667, says, "We are hybrid." We'll be right back, everybody. Stay tuned for more from earthfiles.com, the one and only Miss Linda Moulton Howe.
I'm David Jacobs, a retired professor of history from Temple University, and you are listening to Dr. J Radio Live.